neighbours told me that is that the kiddies keep falling deaf, you see. It's not really falling deaf, it's got an ear defect which has affected its balance. And it's only a little kid, and he's saying, well, we've all come from a very healthy family, Now he's thinking that somewhere along the line it might be related to a sort of AIDS infection. I said, well, what makes you think about that? He said, well, I had an HIV test about 4 years ago. He said, well, nowadays, he said, I've been told that it was really wrong, and the Bible was talking about sins and the fathers and the population and fear and the fear and the so he's not sure.
I don't know whether everybody is here yet. It isn't bad anymore.
He doesn't know that.
Now, what we'll do is, at the beginning, Dr. Mazur will have the opening address, and then there'll be a short prayer. Reverend Fathers, Members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Secretary of the Chornobyl Committee, I call upon our committee chairman, Dr. Lubomir Mazur, to deliver the opening address to today's rally.
Your Grace, Reverend Fathers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends one and all of the victims of Chornobyl. On the 29th of January this year, following on from an initiative proposed by the board of the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain, an inaugural coordinating meeting was held at the premises of the London College of the Ukrainian Catholic University. It was held by representatives of the Ukrainian Catholic, Orthodox and Evangelical churches, as well as 23 other leading expatriate Ukrainian community organizations. At the meeting, a motion was passed unanimously that all represented bodies be recognized as having convened to become founder members of a new voluntary organization with charitable intent under the name of the Chornobyl Committee. Interests represented on the committee included the widest spectrum of Ukrainian community life, from educational bodies, community welfare and youth organisation at one end of the spectrum, to ladies' circles and war veterans at the other. All present committed themselves wholly to servicing the aims and objectives of the Chornobyl Committee. The Chornobyl Committee, a wholly voluntary organisation with charitable intent, set itself the task of coordinating the 30,000 strong Ukrainian community in this country, its organisational skills, its know-how, expertise, talents, efforts and resources, to solemnly commemorate with honour and dignity the 5th anniversary of the world's greatest and worst nuclear catastrophe. From last Friday, Chornobyl Committee branches in the 70 Ukrainian communities throughout England, Scotland and Wales organised commemorative services, collections and exhibitions at the local level to mark the anniversary of the Chornobyl nuclear disaster. Yesterday, the National Chornobyl Committee organised centrally an ecumenical prayer service in Westminster Cathedral, and similarly today's rally here in Trafalgar Square, where we are pleased to have and see 3 generations of Ukrainians remembering and paying their respects to the victims of the nuclear holocaust. So much for the introduction, and now for a look at the legacy of the Chornobyl disaster. Because of the sheer incompetence, careless attitudes and blatant complacency of those authorised and designated responsible for the design, construction and servicing of the Chornobyl nuclear power station in Ukraine, it was at 1:23 in the morning local time on the 26th of April 1986 when an unjustifiably dangerous experiment was being performed in the number 4 reactor. Critical errors of judgment were created and created conditions under which radioactive uranium fuel rods superheated to 3,000 degrees centigrade. This physical process resulted in the creation of such tremendous pressure that the reactor's 1,000-ton concrete ceiling was blown off like a matchbox lid. As part and parcel of this explosion, the awesome figure of 9 tons of uranium and radioactive debris were ejected into the immediate surrounding countryside, whilst thousands of more tons of highly radioactive fallout were spread over a wide area. The scale of the resultant disaster was then, and is still today, proving incalculable and unmanageable. In terms of statistics, the tragedy has been since recognised as being 90 times more severe than that created as a result of the dropping of the Hiroshima atom bomb. The resultant cover-up and disinformation by the Soviet authorities was instrumental in creating many more fatalities and victims than there would otherwise have been. The people within the immediate area of the accident were not evacuated until 36 hours afterwards, 1.5 days. It was the Soviet authorities in the Kremlin who masterminded, planned and coordinated information dissemination and the so-called public relations exercise that kept the world in the dark about the Chornobyl accident until political pressure from Swedish authorities, who had been registering excessive amounts of background radiation for some days, put the Soviet authorities in the unenviable and embarrassing position of having to release a statement. This was done only 3 days after the Chornobyl tragedy. Notwithstanding the inadequacy of the Soviet authorities' response, the disaster was not to end there, for the reactor continued to release highly radioactive smoke and materials into the atmosphere for a further 10 days and intermittently thereafter. Today, Ukraine is reaping the seeds of disaster that were sown in Chornobyl 5 years ago. From evidence gathered by experts in the field, there are at least 300,000 children and adults who are likely to die from radiation poisoning and radiation-related cancers. 4 million people, including 350,000 children, are still living on land heavily contaminated by radiation. 6.5 million hectares of farmland and woodland have been devastated by radiation contamination. And to cap it all, the Ukrainian people are still not being told the full truth as to the extent of the Chornobyl disaster and its effects on the nation's health today and on future generations. The cataclysmic awesomeness of the nuclear accident that happened in Chornobyl, Ukraine, 5 years ago, has today been shown to be of such awful proportions that it has uniquely and tragically defined and identified Ukraine and its people on the world scene. Today, the mere mention of the word Chornobyl provokes a shudder and an instant sympathetic response from mankind throughout the 4 corners of the world. Today, we can say without contradiction that the horrific scale of the Chornobyl nuclear accident is calling into question the basic genetic survival of the Ukrainian people. With troubled hearts and minds, we see how today's Soviet authorities are shamelessly exploiting the Chornobyl tragedy for ostensibly scientific purposes. We condemn the hypocrisy and complacency that is emanating from the Kremlin. 5 years ago, following the accident, the Soviet authorities should have taken the next logical step of protecting the world from a similar catastrophe and shutting down all other faulty RBMK-type nuclear installations similar to Chornobyl that exist not only in Ukraine and Belarusia, but are strewn throughout the other republics of the Soviet Union. We see today just how the Soviet authorities have been criminally negligent, how they have derelicted their duty towards and abrogated responsibility for the victims of the Chornobyl tragedy. They have paid merely lip service to the provision of medical care and attention, and where efforts appear to have been made, they have been undertaken complacently and been shown to be woefully inadequate. All of our hearts bleed when we see pictures of the helpless ill, victims of radiation poisoning, particularly the poor children, who are innocently suffering the consequences of the careless and contemptible attitudes of those in authority. Today, the Ukrainian nation has literally hundreds of thousands of its people who are critically ill and are dying slow and horrible deaths as a result of the most awesome nuclear disaster in the history of mankind. In closing, I ask your indulgence at this stage and urge you out of respect to bow your heads in silent memory of those innocent victims who have lost their lives as a result of the Chornobyl tragedy. Thank you. I now call upon His Grace Bishop Michael Kuchmiak, together with the priests, to open the proceedings formally with a prayer.
Всі разом будемо молитися. Отче наш, ти що єси на небесах, да святиться ім'я Твоє, да прийде царство Твоє, да буде воля Твоя, як на небі, так і на землі. Хліб наш насущний дай нам днес, і прости нам довги наші, як і ми прощаємо должникам нашим, і не води нас у спокусу, але збав нас лукаво. Амінь. В ім'я Отця і Сина, і Святого Духа. Амінь. Боже, допоможи.
I now call upon the Secretary of the Chornobyl Committee, Fedor Kurlyak, to introduce the next item in the scheduled programme.
The negligence of the Soviet authorities towards the victims of the Chornobyl disaster could not and will not escape our attention. With this in mind, the Chornobyl Committee has arranged that a delegation of 50 Ukrainian children travel from this rally to the Soviet embassy to solemnly lay a wreath on behalf of us all present here today in memory of the Chornobyl children. A delegation will thereafter deliver a letter by hand for the attention of the Soviet ambassador, Mr. Lev Zarmyatin. Whilst the children are departing, Ms. Lesia Jakiewska will read the text of the letter which is to be delivered. Безвідповідальність совєтської влади супроти жертв Чорнобильської катастрофи не забулося і не забудеться. З цього приводу Краєвий Чорнобильський комітет зорганізував, щоб 50 українських дітей зараз від'їхали від цього віча в напрям совєтської амбасади, де вони зложать вінок у пам'ять своїх ровесників, чорнобильських дітей. Відтак, делегація вручить листа до амбасади для уваги амбасадора СССР. Коли діти від'їжджають, ми заслухаємо зміст того листа, яке відчитає панна Леся Дяківська.
Mr. Lev Zarmyatin, Ambassador, Embassy of USSR, London. Sir, on the 5th anniversary of the Chornobyl disaster, we, Ukrainian children living in Great Britain, wish to express our solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Ukraine and sympathy for everything they have had to suffer. We are fully aware that their suffering has been all the greater because of the secrecy and negligence of the Soviet authorities. The lack of information and preventative medicine at the time of the disaster led to thousands of adults and children receiving dangerously high doses of radiation. The shortage of medical resources means that thousands more are now suffering unnecessarily from illnesses such as childhood leukemia, which could be successfully treated. The lack of basic equipment and the absence of comprehensive health studies means that screening has reached only a fraction of those affected by radiation, and no one knows what the long-term health effect might be on both this and succeeding generations of children. The unwillingness of the Soviet authorities to evacuate contaminated areas outside the 30-kilometre closed zone means that thousands continue to be exposed to the dangers of high doses of radiation in their daily lives. We believe it is time the truth was told, and that the Soviet government, with the help of the West, should begin to deal honestly with the effects of the Chornobyl disaster. To this end, we demand the bringing to justice of all who authorized and led the campaign of disinformation, including the former Communist Ukrainian President, Valentina Shevchenko, and regional Communist Party heads in areas such as police. An immediate start on comprehensive health studies under the auspices of the World Health Organization, an increase in the Ukrainian health budget so that more resources can be made available for screening and treatment of those affected by radiation, the immediate evacuation of the contaminated zones in the Narodichi and Polski areas, a commitment to allow Ukraine to seek medical and other aid from the West, a guarantee that voluntary aid from Ukrainians in the West will not be hindered by Soviet bureaucracy, and that such aid will be allowed to pass freely to the areas in Ukraine it is most needed, an immediate closure of all RMB key reactors on Ukrainian territory, and an immediate halt to the planned program of construction of yet more nuclear reactors. It is only by fulfilling these measures that the Soviet government will begin to make amends to the Ukrainian people for their appalling and largely unnecessary suffering over the last 5 years. For and on behalf of the children of the Ukrainian community in Great Britain, Lyubomir Mazur, Chairman, Fedor Kulyak, Secretary.
Вельмишановна громадо, зараз буде переводитися збірка на ціль покриття великих коштів, пов'язані з відбуттям сьогоднішнього відзначення. Краєвий Чорнобильський комітет є свідомий вашої великої пожертви, щоб прибути тут до Лондону на ці же відзначення. Однак ми ще просимо вас, щоб ви причинилися із щедрою добровільною пожертвою на згадану ціль. Усі розчислення будуть оприлюднені після відбуття відзначення в обіжному письмі до громад та на сторінках Української думки. На коли буде надвижка, її перекинеться на фонд матері і дитини. One of the main aims of the Chornobyl Committee for today's rally was to have a speaker present from Ukraine to give an authoritative first-hand account of the consequences of the Chornobyl disaster. It gives me great pleasure, therefore, to announce that we have in our midst today a member of the Ecological Council of Ukraine, Ms. Lesia Fedoruk, who I now call upon